right, folks, welcome back to the Roswell UFO Symposium. I am your co-host, Mike. We have co-host Shane below me, and we have co-host Toby in the corner. We are joined by guest tonight, Matthew Roberts. If you don't know who Matthew is, you should go check out his book, Initiated. I have the link down below to the Amazon store. Also, he was stationed on the USS Roosevelt during the 2015 Gimbal encounter. He also worked at the Office of Naval Intelligence. I've had him on Mind Escape a couple times, and he's just a really, really interesting guy, and has his pulse on a lot of different things like the hero's journey and what's going on with the mind during these experiences. So I really recommend his book and anything you can find him on, basically. So before we get started here tonight, big announcement. We are going to be at the Roswell UFO Expo, Toby, Shane, and I. There will be some other big announcements coming up as well, but you can also buy tickets right now if you go to UFOexpo.com. Tickets are on sale, so go check that out. And again, go check out Matthew's book. I have the link down below. If you want to support the Roswell UFO Symposium, I have the Linktree link down below. Follow us on all the social media stuff, and there's a merch store. Just lots of amazing stuff, and we'll have more things to roll out in the future here, but check that out. And without further ado, welcome on the show, Matthew.
Thanks for having me. Is this your first show?
This is the third episode. We had we had Chuck Sikowski on as the first guest, and then the second episode was a train wreck because Shane took a bunch of edibles at UFO Congress, and so I think he bit off a little bit more than he could chew.
So this is our first one with him back, so to speak.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for doing this. Like I said, we had you on Mind Escape a couple times a few years ago. And, that was interesting, too. Shout out to my buddy Lee Adams. He's the one that put you and I in contact together, and he was in the Navy as well. He was just actually on Mind Escape the last week. We had Red Panda Koala on. But, so what have you been up to lately? Are you working on a new book? Are you just kind of doing your own thing? Or are you just I know I've seen you in spaces. We've been talking about experiencers and experiences and things like that, but is there anything new you're working on?
I'm working on a new book, and I got the working title of Master of Animals is what I'm going to call it, and it's just named that because the Master of Animals is an ancient motif that has everything to do with this topic. So that's why I chose it. Other than that, I've just been on spaces occasionally with you guys, working a lot, done a little bit of TV stuff, got some more coming up, so that should be pretty exciting.
Awesome. Matt, you want to tell everybody out in the audience a little bit about your experience when it first started and how that went down?
We can talk about that. So I like the intro, like you said in the intro, I was stationed on board the USS Theodore Roosevelt for the Gimbal event. I was a cryptologist on board, and so that there was that, and then after that, I transferred to the Office of Naval Intelligence as a cryptologic analyst, and so obviously I saw a little bit more while stationed at ONI, and then while I was there at ONI, that's when I started to have these just crazy experiences. The first one kind of introduced me to this book called The Kabbalion, which was in itself a very frightening experience because it kind of was like it was just like the universe was bearing down on me, and it was like, you will do this, you know? And it wrecked my mind, to be honest, in the beginning. Um, and I don't know if you want me to tell that story or not, but it's kind of a
Yeah.
long story. So yeah, so anyway, like I was just like everybody else when I first got to O&I in 2017, and the New York Times article hit, and so all of this suddenly became public. There was the gimbal footage was released, and that was a big shock to me because I had seen it back in 2015, and then here it was. Now I'm watching it on my phone, and like that should never happen. You don't come across stuff in a skiff that you then often see on your phone. That's just available to the public. So anyway, I the article named an organization called TTSA, which we're all familiar with now. Um, and so I decided, well, let me see if any of those folks wrote books about this, because I kind of wanted to know more about it. Um, and so I read, some of Tom DeLonge's stuff. I read some Valet, and then at the end of Tom DeLonge's book, one of them, he talks about these ancient tablets, right? And so I started looking up ancient tablets because I was kind of impatient for the next book to come out. And I came across, the Hermetic teachings, the Emerald tablets, and that led me to this book called The Kabbalion. And I'm looking this up one night, and I read the synopsis of the book, and the book seems to imply to people that we have no free will. So I was like, well, you know, I'm not going to read this because it says, there's purpose to everything. There's nothing happens by chance. There's no accidents. And so I just thought, well, this is too out there. This isn't really on topic. I'm not going to read that. Um, but the next day, I had to drive down south to Pax River from Washington D.C. And I'm on my way back, and I'm thinking about all this stuff. And the night before, when I was looking up all this, I was thinking, well, what are my other resources? So I tried to look up MUFON to see if they had a local chapter in my area, and I couldn't find anything. And so I'm driving on this road back to DC from Pax River, and this little hatchback kind of zooms up beside me and cuts me off. And on the back, there was this graphic that said, MUFON, Maryland, find us on Facebook. And I was like, oh, well, I don't, I don't do Facebook. So that's why I didn't see anything, being in Intel, I didn't think Facebook was appropriate for me. So it wasn't something I did. Anyway, so I was like, well, that's kind of a coincidence, and then as this is happening, I look off to my right, and we're passing a Hobby Lobby. And I made a note of it because I had never seen a Hobby Lobby before, but I was aware of the kind of controversial, the controversy surrounding the Supreme Court decision with involving them. And not only that, but someone pointed out to me later that they also got in trouble for these ancient artifacts that they were kind of smuggling almost.
Yeah, they had some Sumerian cuneiform tablets.
Yeah. And so I made a mental note of that, and then I'm at home that night, and I'm about to go to bed. It's probably about 10:30, 11 o'clock, something like that. And I'm headed up the stairs. My roommate's in the living room watching TV, and he says to me, "You know what's wrong with the Republicans?" Because he's kind of a liberal. He was watching the talking heads on the news. And I said, no, what? And he was like, Hobby Lobby. And he was like, that decision allowed all this dirty corporate money into campaigns, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of talked to him about it for a minute. And then I went upstairs and shut the door to my room. And I thought, that's kind of another big coincidence. I saw that Hobby Lobby today. And, my roommate just mentioned that out of the blue for no apparent reason. I mean, I wasn't talking to him or anything. I was on my way up the stairs to go to bed. So, all of a sudden my heart starts pounding in my chest. And I thought, oh my God, what is this? Am I going to have a heart attack or something? And so I kind of just sat on my bed and just waited for it to subside. And then I started to get this powerful urge to get in my car and drive. And I thought, I have never felt anything like this before, this powerful urge to go drive. So I thought, well, let me just the feelings weren't subsiding and the pounding in my chest wasn't going away. So I thought, well, okay, I'll just do this and I'll see there's nothing to it, right? It's just a wild goose chase and it's all in my head. And so I go down and I get in my car and it's a 3-point turn to get out of the driveway and I back out into the first point of the 3-point turn and I stopped and I put the car in drive and I thought, I can't do this. It's like 11 o'clock. It's almost midnight. I got to go to work tomorrow. Where am I going? This is nuts, you know? And I thought to myself, for my own sanity, I can't do this because this is going to just keep continuing. So I decided I was just going to pull back into my spot in the driveway and go to bed. And just as I thought that, I felt this. It was like I was attached to a light switch and somebody had just turned it on, this like electrical buzzing through my body. And my hands like turned the steering wheel towards the road and my foot stepped on the gas and I didn't do that, right? So, you know, at this point, like the buzzing then shut off and I'm in a panic at this point. I no shit, I'm a 39-year-old man and I was terrified. I started crying and I slammed on the brakes and the urge was getting more and more powerful that I had to go drive. And I thought to myself, okay, I just don't want to get shocked again. Um I'm going to do it. I'm going. I even said out loud, I said, okay, I'm going, you know. Um, so I pull out and I'm driving down the road. I was headed for the Maryland 5 South, and there was a gas station right before the freeway ramp. So I stop at this gas station to grab a drink. I didn't know how long this was going to take, and so I pull in, and then I get the feeling that whatever was meant to happen tonight was going to happen right here at this gas station. And I thought to myself, this is impossible. No way. No way. And so I'm looking around to see, is somebody going to start shooting? What's going to happen here? And then I see it right in front of me. There was something that was clearly out of place. There was this homeless man and these two women sitting at a table out front eating, and it's midnight, right? And these two women are dressed to the nines in business attire, not a hair out of place, perfect makeup, you know, and they're sitting with this filthy homeless man at a gas station at midnight near the freeway. I mean, this wasn't the best part of town, so I was like, this shouldn't be happening. Um, I mean, they were so well dressed. They look like women that I work with, and they were going to go brief Congress. I mean, that's the appearance they had, you know. Um, so I was like, I don't want to get out of the car. And then just as I thought that, like there was this booming male voice in my head that said, "Get out," you know? And I was just absolutely terrified. So I grabbed the handle and I'm walking across the parking lot, and after this electrical shock and that voice, like my legs are like wet noodles, right? I don't know what the hell is gonna happen. And I'm walking past this table, and one of the women raises her hand to the homeless man, and she starts pointing at him, and she said, "You see, there's no such thing as coincidence. Everything happens for a reason." She said, "I never sit at places like this, but something told me to sit here tonight." And with that, I walked into the store and I was like, "No way. No way did that lady just say that." Because that was exactly what this book, The Kabbalion, said, that everything happens for a reason and there's no such thing as coincidence. So I knew that, okay, I have to read this book. Um, And so I did. The next day, I listened to an audio copy of the book, and that was the beginning of everything. And then subsequently, all of my experiences lined up in such a way that they kind of demonstrated the principles laid out in this book. Um, and this book was written in like 1908, and it's very old. Um, And I was just like, "No way did this guy know how did he know all of this?" You know? And so throughout my experiences, I started to read more and more of his material, because it was, so the book is called The Kabbalion by the Three Initiates, but this guy, William Walker Atkinson, was one of its authors. And, he ended up writing, back in the early 1900s, some like 110 books on this topic. Um, and his books are absolutely incredible. I mean, the man was a genius, truly. Um,
Yeah, I've read it. It's it's definitely worth reading if you're into like the esoteric traditions, and if you think of the universe in terms of frequency and vibration and things like that. There's a lot of elements of that kind of explains, what they think's going on, or what the author thought was going on in the universe. So yeah, I definitely recommend it. Um, I wanted to ask you, Matt, did you see the Ryan Graves interview on Joe Rogan yesterday?
I did not know.
Um,
How
can
was
you
that?
explain? It was pretty good. I mean, he explained a lot of stuff, but can you explain his relationship to the whole gimbal thing? Because I think that's kind of important too.
Who, Ryan Graves'
Yeah.
relationship to the gimbal? From my understanding, and I mean, don't quote me on any of this, but from what I understand is that he isn't the one necessarily that took that footage; that it was another pilot, and they're both in the same, um, uh, you know, air wing. They both belong to the same air wing, so they work together. Um, and Ryan Graves has certainly seen some things, but I don't think that particular footage was taken by him. Um,
Yeah. So, but I just wanted to make that correlation between the gimbal video, because there is a, because you have the people associated with the Tic Tac, which you have the people on the Princeton, and then also people on the Nimitz over there, and then with the gimbal you had, you guys on the USS Roosevelt, that were a part of that. So I just wanted to make that, clear, because I know that there's a lot
yeah,
of people.
people get that mixed up all the time. They conflate these two incidences, but I mean, to be honest with you, though, I none of these incidences are really um, that different, and they happen all the time. So, uh, nor are they special, because they do happen all the time. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know what else people need, beyond that. What more they need in terms of disclosure, but it's all there. You know.
They're waiting for a UFO to land at the White House.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know what I tell people though is that they won't ever do that, right? Because that's the wrong direction. They and you know I retweeted what somebody tweeted about me yesterday, in that I'm not really that interested in the nuts and bolts, because to me that stuff is really kind of um it's just not that interesting to me. What's interesting to me is the phenomenon and how it relates to us as humans, and what our experiences are with that, and what that can do for us. And to me, that's much more profound than seeing some craft in the sky. You know, that's kind of like a one and done. If you've seen it once, it's like, oh, okay. You know, do I really need to see more? I know that this is a thing, you know. So I don't know. I'm not a nuts and bolts kind of guy. There's much more profound aspects to this, and that we need to get into. You can try and science this all day long, and use it to explain the physical craft, but at the end of the day, that's not going to tell you anything in terms of the why, you know. And that to me is what I'm interested in.
Real quick,
Don't you?
Matthew.
Yeah.
Ahmed in the chat asked, "Does Matthew feel like the Gimbal incident or other events elements in his life kicked off this initiation?" Love y'all.
Do I think that say that again? Do I think that other events in my life kicked off the
No, do you feel
initiation?
like the Gimbal incident, or was there other events, possible elements that kicked off this event series of paranormal events?
Yeah, I well that's there's a lot to that. Um Something that I've subsequently learned about all of this is that uh there are very important psychological traits that you have to possess. Uh and that's kind of what they're looking for in someone that they make contact with. And I just so happen to possess those. And this was just kind of a psychology that I had been cultivating throughout my life. And I I just kind of happened on it by accident. I thought it was just a way of kind of mentally I was simplifying my life is what I was doing. And so I was going about my life in a very controlled way in terms of my emotional state, and my thoughts, things that I would allow to enter my head. Um, I was just always very much in control of that, and I was a very cool, calm, collected type individual as a result. And that is exactly what you need to be an experiencer. I talk about something called positive personality disintegration, which just the theory talks about how the more trauma you experience in your life, then the more opportunity you have to work on yourself psychologically. And this was a theory that was developed by a Polish psychologist that had spent some time in Krakow during World War II. And he was, I think, one of a handful of people who survived medical experimentation by the Nazis. Um, so anyway, that's his theory on it. That, you know, the more trauma, then the more opportunity you have to incorporate these things into your personality, and to have them make you stronger or better in some way. And that was something that I had always done. Unfortunately, I think a lot of experiencers, when these experiences start, they're so outside of the norm that they don't necessarily apply the theory of positive personality disintegration. But I did. I did, because I thought, you know, I knew, you know, based on the things that I had seen on the TR and then working at ONI, I knew that this stuff was not a joke, and it was not the realm of tinfoil hats, that this stuff was real. So when it started happening to me, I knew it was significant and profound. And so I thought, I want to figure this out, And so there was nothing that was going to take me out of this experience. I was dead set, that I was just going to stay in it no matter how bad it got, no matter how awful it was. I wanted more because more would help me figure this out. So it was anyway, like there was this heavy kind of depression that set in. I didn't I didn't do anything to try and get rid of that. I didn't want to distract myself from this experience. I shut myself off from the outside world. I would go to work and I was there to the extent that I had to be. And then I would go home and I would start reading and I would work on this, and it was just a crazy, crazy experience. But most people, like I said, that heavy depression sets in, and your instinct is to run, right? Run from this because it's bad. Um, and I just did not do that, and I thank God I didn't, because um, I learned that that is a part of this process, this depression that sets in, um, and it's essential. I don't know why, but it is. And people, I started looking this stuff up after I went through it because I realized, well, I'm not the only one that's been through this. There's got to be others. So I decided to look it up, and sure enough, there's people who talk about this heavy depression, or this in like kind of occultism. They talk about and alchemy. They talk about this feeling of melancholy that comes over you, um, and it just transforms you. It's got to have something to do with, Nolan talks a lot about the brain and brain chemistry. It has to have something to do with that your neuroplasticity is improved, and so you start making new neural connections where you didn't have them before. And that is kind of what allows you to connect to the singular thing that is the universe, and it is conscious. And it will show you that, and it is very scary. It is very scary at times. It turns your life upside down.
I think Shane can agree to that point.
Actually, I was going to mention his book. I found Matthew in a space. From my experience, I was looking for a place and ended up on UFO Twitter. First heard him in a space, bought his book. Eventually, I was texting him live with my experiences as going on. So I'm very thankful to him. Other people have come before, and he keeps doing it. That's the reason I speak to it. So thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, Shane. Thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, and I had never, while I was in the experiences, even though this book, the Kabbalion, was written by the three initiates, you know, and then later on when my experiences concluded, I I knew that they had concluded because they let me know that. They let me know that it was over and that I had finished and that I was successful. And I had this guy who was in my dreams. He was teaching me about human psychology, and I was asking him questions, and he was answering them. And as I woke up from that dream, I had this name, this voice repeating this name in my head. It was Robert Moore. And so I looked him up, and he was Dr. Robert Moore. He was a Jungian psychoanalyst in Chicago. And he wrote a book called The Archetype of Initiation. And so I read that, and it was like nail on the head. It was everything that I had been through, and he's describing it here. You know, I was like, oh, this was an initiation. You know, but that I didn't put any of that together. And I will say that for all the talking I do about this in terms of mythology and the psychology and everything, it wasn't necessary that I understood at the time the experiences that were happening to me. Um, and I think that that's where experiencers get kind of mixed up, right? Is that they'll have these experiences and they won't know how to put it together. And what I did was I just acknowledged it and said, okay, I'm fine with that. They'll show you something and then you just kind of accept it and take it on board and move on, right? And so that's what I did without really explaining it in any kind of depth to myself or knowing what it meant. Because I think these experiences, they're not speaking to you per se. They're speaking to your subconscious. These experiences speak directly to the human subconscious in an effort to try and bring it to the fore in your mind, right? And that's what people call awakening. Is it's just you start to experience the subconscious consciously rather than subconsciously, and it's quite an amazing thing. Um,
Do you know was that Robert Moore guy was he part of that? I know there's a Carl Jung Institute where you can go and get certification. It's like a where psychologists go and learn about Jungian psychology, and you get, like I said, certifications. It's like a school.
yeah, I do think that that's in Chicago, and I think he taught there. Um, but later on in life, he began to suffer with dementia, and so he had to retire. And then he passed away about a year before my experiences began. Um, and so that was just incredible to me. I mean, I didn't know who this guy was teaching me in my dreams until I heard the name Robert Moore, and then I got his book, and then I saw his picture on the back, and I was like, "Holy crap, that's the guy that was in my dream teaching me about human psychology. That's crazy," But by this point, I didn't really think it was crazy after everything I had been through anyway. You know, there really wasn't much that was outside of the realm of, well, I'll believe this, but not that. So so yeah. Something I wanted to point out is that one of these principles in the Kabbalion, and this goes back to a common experience among experiencers that people don't really understand, and that is the whole reproductive aspect of this, right? Uh, People don't understand that, and I certainly had my own experience with that. But one of the principles in the Kabbalion states that it's the law of gender, which is just about generation, creation, and creativity, right? And so um, there's the physical plane, which we all are aware of, right? We all live and have our lives on the physical plane. Um, and so there are things that happen on the physical plane. And this law of gender manifests itself as sex on the physical plane, right? But on the mental plane, it gives birth to something else in the mind, right? Where you start to bring the subconscious to the fore. And people have associated that with a death and resurrection, um, because it's a very painful experience. There's a part of you that dies and then you're reborn. But it's like you're reborn onto a higher plane of existence, this mental plane, right? And so that's what the whole reproductive aspect of this is about. It's like an as above, so below, right? So my experiences, the next experience after I read that book was a sexual experience, right? And so what that experience was telling me is, hey, this is happening on the physical plane, but it's an allegory for what's going to be happening to you throughout this experience, right? A rebirth onto a higher plane of existence, this mental plane. And it was just demonstrating that as above, so below type of thing. Um, this is so complex. I'm not even sure. Did you guys did you understand that at all or no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand Jungian psychology is I guess, as good as people can. I mean, I've read probably 4 or 5 books. Red
Mhm.
Book, Modern Man in Search of a Soul. There's a couple other ones, but yeah, I mean, in terms of all the stuff you're saying and mentioning, yeah, I mean, it definitely resonates, as well as this different types of energy, and I'm right there with you on all this being non-physical, or that being the more important aspect of it, and not necessarily the nuts and bolts. We might differ on some of those aspects, in terms of the non-physical stuff, but I'm right there with you, because I always make this argument, like, it's all consciousness based. Like, we're measuring everything using our consciousness. We're interpreting the world around us without our brains and our mind to interpret all this stuff. None of it really means anything. I mean, unless you're a hardcore dogmatic, materialist or physicalist. But I always make the argument, like, the phenomena is consciousness based, because there would be no phenomena if there wasn't consciousness. I mean, I'm more of an idealist, so, but the argument against that wouldn't necessarily be nuts and bolts. In my opinion, it would be illusionism, which is the idea that we don't even have consciousness, that this is all just a byproduct of biochemistry.
Mhm.
Which I don't believe that at all, but that would be the argument against it, which would be like the illusionist or illusionism. But yeah, I'm right there with you with the non-physical stuff. I mean, I can't speak for Toby or Shane, but that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah. And
Tobes, what do you think?
what's that?
I was asking Toby what he thought.
Oh,
Honestly, I mean, I am fascinated with the nuts and bolts aspect of it, but I agree with you guys too. I think consciousness is probably the bigger part of it. And I do worry on a nuts and bolts level if that's something that humankind can obtain. What are they going to do with it? Because people are destructive. Let's just,
mhm.
let's say that. If there is a technology that, say, can, travel at the speed of light or warp us from one spot to another, I just worry that it's all just going to get militarized. So I agree. I think focusing on the consciousness aspect of it will get us closer to understanding, like, what is this? Where does it come from? I mean, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. And I guess my response to that would be that, just that, I one of the things that I experienced kind of demonstrated that for me, right? There was one day I had some rental properties. I owned some property down in the Norfolk area. And so one weekend I had gone down there to check on them, and I was at my house in Portsmouth, Virginia, and I was kind of unloading my bags from my truck, and I looked up and I saw a craft just kind of floating right above the tree line. And I thought to myself, "Oh, they followed me down here, and they wanted me to know that they followed me down here." And so I was like, "Okay, they're aware that I have gone out of town." Um, and so, you know, I'm at my house. I had some friends met me there. And the next morning I woke up and I went to go check my phone, and my phone screen is just like blue. It's like the blue screen of death, right? And so I was like, well, that's weird. I've never seen my phone do that. So I open up my laptop, and same thing with my laptop. It's all my technology is dead, you know. And I realized, I was like, oh, this has got to be some kind of virus that I've caught, that's done this to all of my technology, because it's all connected, right? And that in itself, that whole experience in itself is a whole other thing, right? Because we're all connected. This kind of toxic mentality that we have, it's very contagious. And so I thought to myself, how can humans ever move forward with this? Right? We can't do this. This technology, we're so dependent upon it now. And if we were even more dependent upon it, any nut job with having a bad day could just ruin society, you know? And so I thought, this is ridiculous. We can't do this. We can't move forward. And I had been looking up how, like, stuff online about, like, just automating every process, right? Machine automating and AI, and just having machines do all of our labor and everything for us, right? There's no reason we should have to work. But then, when my computer caught this virus, I was like, we can't do that, because there's always going to be somebody having a bad day that's going to want to mess this up for everybody, you know? And so I just started to get really discouraged, and I was like, this is it. I had been depressed for months at this point. I had been having non-human entities in my room at night telling me things, other experiences, and I was like, for what? I'm done with this, right? I don't even see a point to it at this point. And this is kind of in the middle of my experiences. And I was like, I'm just going to throw all these books in the garbage, and I'm going to forget about it when I get home. And I was so upset that I and my friends saw this. I think they were a bit worried because they contacted my family afterwards, but I was so pissed, that and it wasn't about having to replace it. It wasn't about the money for me. It was the fact that someone would be so malicious as to destroy your technology just to destroy it. Destruction for destruction's sake. And so I was just incensed, and I ran out of my house. I grabbed my bags, and I grabbed my laptop, and I started smashing it on the steps, the brick steps outside my my house and the front porch, and then I smashed my cell phone, and my friends were just kind of aghast, right, standing there. Uh, and I was like, if you want to get a hold of me, then write me a letter, And I got in my truck, and I I drove back to DC. Um, but I was like, the whole drive back, it's like a 3.5 hour drive. I'm screaming and yelling in my truck, and I'm pounding on the steering wheel, and I was like, just leave me alone. I don't want to do this anymore. Um, so, that night I went to bed probably angrier than I have ever gone to bed before. And I don't even know how I fell asleep. I was that angry. But anyway, I wake up in the middle of the night, and I was angry because I felt that this sleep paralysis. Whenever they wake you up, you feel this sleep paralysis. So I was like, here we go. I told you guys to leave me alone, and yet again, here you are. And I wanted to punch something. Um, and so I opened my eyes, and there's this. I look across my nightstand, everything's blurry and coming into focus, and I can't move, obviously. And across my nightstand, I see this face, right? And there's this small man standing next to my nightstand, and he's got like this locked beard and long locked hair, and he's wearing these big black goggles. Um, and I can see that the goggles are some kind of technology. There's like a red light that I could see glowing inside them, and I could see like the ridge of his nose underneath the glass. Um, but I'm looking at him, and I'm like, there's no way this is happening right now. What is this? This little man in my room. Um, but he was like all white. Everything on him was white. And he said to me, he's looking at me, and he says, don't give up, keep going. And then he put me back to sleep. And I think I had a few choice mental words for him um, as I was falling back asleep. But, I after that night, I thought, I woke up the next morning, and I was like, ugh, this guy, he probably knows something I don't know, so I gotta keep going with this, whatever it is, and I was just so tired of being depressed and just scared and um terrified and angry. I was just tired of all of it, and yet I thought I have to keep going now. And so how can I keep going? And I had been in this haunted house years before. And while going through this haunted house, I was terrified. And then I thought to myself, why am I terrified? This is all just theatrics, right? I don't need to be scared. And so I just turned it off. And just casually walked through the rest of the house as people are like, bah, 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 scaring you. And I wasn't scared. And I was kind of angry that I did that because I had spent some money to get in there, and the thrill was gone. But I realized that I could do that with this situation. So I'll just shut that off. I'll shut that down. I'll shut down the fear. I'll shut down the, the just being terrified, and I'll shut down all of my feelings on this and just move forward.
I wanted to
And so,
ask you real quick about the sleep paralysis aspect of it,
yeah.
though. So, like, I've had sleep paralysis a couple times. There wasn't entities, but I felt this, like, white light flood over me, and then I felt, like, pinned down, and the more I fought it, the more it would make me, like, pull me back more. So then I just, like, give into it, and then it kind of releases. That's at least my couple experiences with it. One, there was some visual stuff happening. Maybe I'll discuss it one day, but it wasn't entities. It was more, seemed like almost prophetic in a way. But my question is, do you think that the sleep paralysis is like the mechanism in which we interact with these things? Like it could be both, right? It could be, you could be having sleep paralysis, but you could also be interacting with these entities. At least that's the way I always interpret it.
Well, what do you mean? So you mean like
the things, there's something happening, like there's something external happening. However, the actual sleep paralysis is the biological mechanism in which we interact with whatever that is. It's like an altered state of consciousness.
yeah. Yeah, actually I think you're right about that, but I also think that in itself is also kind of symbolic. And I'd have to think about this some more. But there's something about how when you let go in the sleep paralysis experience, it starts to subside, right? And so it's all about letting go and releasing, and just like I was just talking about, you have to let go of these things, right? Let go of the fear, and then you're released, right? And I think that that is symbolic of the initiation process, and so when you're doing that and you're letting go in the experience, what that's supposed to be telling you is that, hey, it's like they're knocking on your forehead, hey dummy, you gotta let go of everything, and then this will be better, you know so I think that has a lot to do with it. It's symbolic as well, you know
So how long total did your experience last? Was it a matter of years, months?
No, it was months. It was probably about 9, 10 months, something like that. And at the end of it, I came into this. Uh, I can only just I looked up descriptions of like nirvana and enlightenment later, and that was more that kind of describes it pretty accurately. Um, and actually, just recently, I was watching this documentary about Buddha, and it was narrated by, I think, Susan Sarandon. And as I'm watching it, I'm like, yeah, that's pretty much what happened to me, you know. Uh, so yeah, it's pretty. These stories, all of this stuff is out there, right? I mean, it's just that people don't necessarily associate it with UFOs, but they should, because that's absolutely what's happening.
So when you say they, are you referring to how would you describe them? As like entities, beings, parts of your consciousness?
Yeah, I would say all of the above. I mean, there was you can't think of them as separate from yourself, but I I also can't think of you as separate from me, right? Even on the physical plane, none of us are separated by anything. Um, and so that's kind of the way you have to think about that. It's that they're just kind of everything is an extension of yourself or a part of yourself. You are a part of everything else that's living. Um, and so I people ask me that a lot, like, what are they? Um, I think I now know that reincarnation is a thing through these experiences. So, because you also have these experiences with dead people, right? Like with Robert Moore, I've had experiences with my brother who passed away in 2010 and my mom who passed away in 2015. Um, so I know that the consciousness survives death for sure. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind about that. Um, so as a result of that, though, we're all reincarnated, right? The reincarnation has to be a thing too. So when you talk about who are they, I think some of them were us. You know, I was recently watching this documentary that Whitley Strieber did, and they were interviewing this woman who had experiences back in the 50s. And one of the things she recounted on this interview was that she was pregnant back in the 50s or 60s, something like that. And she had these entities in her room and they were like, "Why are you afraid of us?" And she said to them, "Because you're so ugly." And then one of them said, "My dear, one day you will look exactly like us." Um, and so, when people say, "What are they?" I think they are us, initiates past, perhaps.
Ooh,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
will be
exactly.
ugly too.
Hey, real quick, Matt. As an experiencer, I'm curious what you think about, I don't know, some place or something for experiencers besides spaces in UFO Twitter or possibly in-person groups at the occasional Congress, UFO Congress every year or something. Do you think the government should be standing up something to help experiencers?
I think it would behoove them to do that, um, because one of the things that this experience taught me is that humanity's best minds come out of this. Um, and ancient cultures always knew that, and that's why they had their mysteries, their mystery schools, right? Because they would teach this to people and put people through these initiations because they realized how important it was to have these uh, 1,000-pound brains within society. And so they actively produced people like this. Um, and so yes, I think it's absolutely necessary. I mean, if you are any nation, right, and you want to take over the world, this is how you do it. Um, through this consciousness stuff, because this is the real deal. This is the permanent stuff, right? And so that's, I mean, I with the US government trying to deny this and push it away, it's only a detriment. It is such a detriment to society, to humanity. We've got to embrace this and move forward if we want to be smart about it.
So what do you think it's going to take to push them in that direction?
I think it's gonna take, coming out with it, just out with it, right? I mean, there's no reason to keep any of this a secret. I
Yeah,
made my
they could
opinions
say
known.
like, hey, there's this real thing happening without disclosing any of the technology or data or evidence that they have. They could say, hey, we have this information, this stuff's here. Like, not everybody's a scientist in the public. It's not like they're gonna read a scientific report on the materials or whatever and be like, oh, yep, I approve this, this is real. They should just come out and be like, with an authority, and be like, there's something here, we can't explain it, we don't, we're not going to disclose the technology because it would be the equivalent of the modern day atomic bomb / Manhattan Project, and we don't want any of these countries that are doing nefarious things to get a hold of this. They could just say something like that, and I think people would be on board with it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, you can show more pictures and video, right? There's more there's more FLIR footage that people can see, I mean, why not show them that? It's and to say that that's classified, well, no, it's not, because there's FLIR footage of all kinds of things, wars that we've been engaged in, so don't tell me that that's classified, because you release this stuff all the time, but somehow when it comes to UFOs, oh, well, that's classified. Well, no, it's not. And it's something we got to do going forward. We can't be afraid of this. And I'm not sure what they think is going to happen. I think that there are a lot of people behind closed doors that don't really understand this on the level that I do. And they've just kind of inherited the program because it's all about who you know. And
Well, yeah, there's like a religious element of it with a lot of people, right? Like within, I mean, you have to look at it as like, if there's religious people that believe that these things are demons, that exists in government too, right? Because those people exist in government.
yeah, but if and I don't like saying this, but I think I think that there are people who are dumb behind closed doors. They're just dumb and dull, and they don't understand what they're working with, right? And so if you want to think that this is demons, just look up the etymology of the word, and you'll discover pretty quickly that it doesn't mean what you think it means.
Comes from
Um,
ancient Greece, just means
yeah,
like entity. Like
right.
Socrates used to have conversations and dialogues with his daemon. And it
Hmm.
wasn't like a nefarious thing. It was just like, oh, even if you go back to ancient Sumeria, like Pazuzu and some of these entities, they weren't full demon, like all evil. They had like redeeming some positive qualities about them too. So like, people don't do their homework. So like, I agree with you. I hate to be the same way about that kind of stuff too, but read a book. Go to the origins of things. Like, do some homework before you start like believing in basing your whole life around something.
Right,
I thought
right.
you said
Yeah.
Matt Damon.
What was that? Say it again.
Chase is Toby's
I said,
daemon.
I thought he said Matt Damon.
Yeah.
Real quick,
Yeah, I
Matthew.
mean,
I was gonna. My bad, Matthew. Go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, go ahead,
I was
Shane.
gonna ask you your opinion on, since he had brought up possibly someone like Christians within the government that may not take this seriously enough, or it could worry them. Do you think there's two fighting factions within the government? Some that want disclosure and others who don't, and that's what part of what's preventing it.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I absolutely. I think I mean, I kind of I feel like I experienced that firsthand. I don't really know though, because I don't fully know what these people's opinions are, but I mean, I made my opinions known that none of this should be classified, and that upset some people. Um, that was really upsetting to some people, like yelling in meetings, upsetting, and it was just when that stuff started to happen to me behind closed doors, I was like, there's no way I can't stay in the Navy and move forward with this. That's just never going to work, because these people, some of them don't want it out. A lot of people were just kind of indifferent. It was just a job that they were doing on the side of their regular normal job that they would do. Kind of like a collateral type duty. But it was just, I think there are people who don't want this out because they don't understand it. But just like Mike said, pick up a book and read. It's not that hard.
And I don't mean it in like a condescending way, but there's a lot of people that really suffer from Dunning-Kruger, where they're like, oh, I know all about demons. And then you like, okay, so like, let's talk about the origins of them. And they don't even know like where it comes from or what civilization and that whole thing. So it's like me, I've cultivated this way of researching where the first thing I do is go to the origin of wherever this came from. Linguistically, the etymology, as you mentioned, culturally, like where do these things come from? And I know we don't all have a million years to do research and whatever, but I got work, I got a family, I do 2 podcasts, I have all sorts of other things going on. You can do it too, so I know that might rub somebody the wrong way, but so be it.
Yeah, and if it's your job, you should do it.
Tell Logan that, Mike.
Yeah. I mean, bottom line is I think that with the phenomenon, nobody has all the answers, but I think kind of what you're saying, in my opinion, I think if we just did a little bit more research, whatever, like you don't have to be into all the same stuff. There's different aspects of it. Maybe you are into the physical, signatures and data and stuff, like that's cool. Like we can all do different, play our part, play your role, whatever that is. So it's not like we're telling everybody, oh, you have to go do this or have to go do that, but whatever you're interested in within the phenomena, like study that, take it to the next level. That's all I think what we're saying. We're not really trying to say anything other than if you're going to have an opinion and you want to have a real dialogue that means something, then put a little time into it. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think with the phenomenon, a lot of the time it's looking for you to put forth effort, right? Because if you're not going to put forth the effort to sit down and read a book or to try and figure this out in some way, then your experiences with the phenomenon are eventually going to just stop because it's not going to waste its time, right? Why are they going to waste time on someone who doesn't want any of the answers, so there has to be effort put forth on your part. And unfortunately, a lot of people just kind of throw their hands up in the air and say, well, I don't know, I guess I'll never know. But of course that's not the case, because if it's happening to you, it's happened to other people, right? So, start drilling down on that. That's where you can go. And if it's been happening to you, then certainly it's been happening in antiquity as well. So, there's a lot to look at. There's a lot of different aspects to this.
We mentioned the obviously like the religious or philosophical kind of differences in the way people look at these things. What about from like department to department? Obviously, your Navy, Shane's Air Force, different aspects of our government have studied different aspects of this phenomenon. Do you think that there is any cooperation, or do you think they're all just trying to do their own things?
I really don't know. I kind of get the sense that it's like everybody trying to do their own things, because we've seen, Chris Mellon talking about how the Air Force is not sharing, right? Which means they've probably got some stuff, they
Shane,
know.
what do you have, Shane? Come on, dude.
I'm too low in the totem pole to have anything.
Yeah, so I feel like there's probably separate programs going on out there that have no idea that other programs exist. And I'm sure and why are we doing that? Why are we duplicating things just because, well, I've got a secret and you can't know about it? Well, screw that. Let's work together and figure this out. Because and this is one of the things that I love about Luis Elizondo recently is that he's doing a lot of international type stuff to try and get international cooperation in this, because this isn't something that just um, affects us here in the United States. Obviously, this is worldwide, so it affects everyone, all of us humans. Um, so why not have all of us looking at it? You know?
Yeah, I
You're right.
agree. And whenever we interviewed Lou, he kind of said people have this idea of government, right? It's this one big, well-oiled machine, but it's not. Everything's so compartmentalized that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. And I think
Yeah,
it's like you said, if they put everything into the same room, put everybody on the same thing, and just shared information, we could figure this out way faster.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, a lot of people don't understand that about working behind closed doors, but you're in a building, right? I was in O&I, and you had to have access to get into different rooms. And if you weren't read into the whatever program's being done in that room, then you don't have access to the door, and you can't get in. And so sure, you're all working towards this one goal, but there are very few people that have all of the information that are read into everything, and that's what has to stop, I think, because then you have these people up at the top who I don't know what they're thinking. They have all this stuff coming at them from different directions, and all of those people could probably put together some kind of cohesive picture, but the only cohesive picture that's being put together is some one dude up at the top, because he's the only one getting all of the sources of information, and it's just stupid to do things that way. It's dumb.
Yep.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Lou Elizondo, because I did notice that it seemed like they got all the UK people on board, and then they slowly started to go a little bit more east, a little bit more east. They go into Europe, Italy, Germany. Yeah, so I definitely noticed that as well. It's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and I hope that they have some success there. um I hope that there are countries that just open the floodgates on this stuff, and I would hope that the U.S. would have been the first, but you know, who knows? Who knows? We should be leading on this, just because we're the wealthiest, most powerful country that has ever existed. Um, we should be leading on it.
I didn't watch the whole thing yet. I stopped halfway through, but that moment of contact, I was really impressed with how Brazil kind of handles it, and the amount of like important cases that they've had too. I mean, I knew that they've had a lot of cases, but I didn't know um, all of them. So yeah, if anybody hasn't checked out Moment of Contact, Shane and I will be doing a review of it on Mind Escape here in the next week or two. But yeah, I recommend that, because actually, and they're doing the whole Congress thing. Their congressional hearings and everything they've done recently. It just seems like they're a little bit more progressive about it than we are. A little less resistant to the idea.
And it kind of makes you wonder if it has anything to do with the fact that it seems like most of the interactions of these craft and beings with people in Brazil have been, excuse me, a little more malevolent, like at certain levels of violence to them, people being burned by lasers, people getting sick after coming into contact with these beings.
Yeah, yeah, I've read about that too, and I don't know I don't know how that fits in yet. Something tells me that maybe it doesn't. Maybe that's us or some other country that's trying to mimic this stuff, and and make it seem bad so that you don't want to go there. You know what I mean? I could see that being a possibility as well. I don't know, just because it's so limited. That I would think. I don't know. I would think that there would be all kinds of mythology about people being burned and their skin melting off if this was something that had been constantly happening and was an actual part of the phenomenon. But you don't see that so much. So I don't know. What do you think about that, Mike? Since you like to look at historical stuff,
I mean, yeah,
would you
there's,
see any context for that?
I mean, not like what you're talking about, not like radiation burns on people or something like what you would see now in some of these cases or what people claim. I mean, who knows, because they could have a different interpretation of it. But yeah, even like looking into like all the weird things and anomalies in historical records that I've come across, I've never seen anything where like, oh, something, um, some sort of phenomenon burned this person, that wasn't based on what we know from, like lightning or something like that. So that's just my opinion. I'm open to being wrong. If somebody has any other information, always leave a comment or, post something. I'm always down for new data. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just, what I've come across. I don't know. Shane, have you ever heard of anything like that? Ancient times or anything?
Did you say Shane? I didn't hear it yet.
Yeah. Yes, I did say Shane, Mr. Shane. No, I was just asking you if you've ever heard of anything, because I know Shane reads a lot too. I didn't know if you had heard anything or come across anything from ancient times in terms of like burns or like some of the effects of like what people have now.
I don't know about the burns, but I'll say I mentioned today in a space that all through history, a lot of the times, things that we've seen that we would call like fairies or in religious books, the Fatima. I think things like that or the burning bush. These are all things that remind me of things that I've experienced or seen in some way. And those are always the first things I go back to, like when I see something like that, like a light that turns on like a match in the sky reminds me of the burning bush, or one of the orbs reminded me of a wheel, Ezekiel's wheel within a wheel. So I think a lot of that plays into this, if you ask me. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. No, I mean, I was just curious, like, well, I mean, specifically like the radiation aspect of it.
Okay, here's an example. Cash
Okay.
Landrum. You know about the Cash Landrum incident?
Yeah, the Cash Lantern case.
Yeah. And actually, when I was going through the archives, 'cause I work at the Roswell Daily Record, I'd have to look at it when I get to work tomorrow, but there was a case, I believe, in Socorro, or it might have been farther north, like Farmington, where a kid actually went outside of his house, saw a UFO, and he got burned by it. So I know it's been mentioned before, but I don't think like on like a large scale.
Do you have a tiny woodpecker in your background, Toby?
Yes.
I also
I
today in a
actually
space.
that now that you're mentioning that, I think I've heard some of that Farmington thing. That sounds familiar. I don't know. I'd have to look into it.
Anecdotally, someone today told her story for the first time in one of our experiencer spaces at Chase Holds, and I was co-hosting it. She was talking about getting out of the vehicle the first time she had shared this, and part of her when she started to peek out of the vehicle or whatever this craft was, and then she ended up leaving. Only part of her face was burned from it because she was shielded by the inside of it. So
Huh.
Well, and then that kind of leads you into Havana syndrome. They think that might be related somehow. I mean, whether it is or not, I don't know.
There was just a paper that came out. I think it said the CIA wasn't satisfied with the way that it's been documented or something. I just saw an article that came out about it yesterday. But yeah, I mean, for me, I kind of agree with Matthew. It seems like maybe that aspect of it's more modern technology or trying to replicate something that's there. Like, let's try and not even reverse engineer, but let's try and copy what we've seen or try and reproduce that. And maybe that's what's causing that. Like, we don't have the capabilities or the engineering that, even if it might not even be engineering, it might just be like the way that the phenomena is, and that we're trying to make a replica of it, and through making that replica, it's inferior and it's causing these side effects. I could totally see that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was gonna say I definitely see that we being accidentally harmed. I just have a hard time believing. There's always a possibility there's some NHI that have it out for us,
Yeah,
that they're
I
just
don't.
intentionally picking us off.
I was gonna say I don't even necessarily think it's intentional. It could just be like a byproduct of testing these things out or whatever. I don't think it's intentionally happening like that. So,
That's what happens when you let Shane design it.
um, so in terms of what's your new book? I mean, you don't have to divulge too much if you don't want to, but what's your new book? You said it has to do with like how we're different than animals or something along those lines, or how we're
Yeah, well, it's called Master of Animals,
master
and
of
the
animals.
Master of Animals motif is just it was a motif in antiquity that commonly depicts a god or a person standing there, and they've got two animals that they're holding on either side of them, or are standing on two lions or something like that,
Like those
or two.
Sumerian relief carvings where the guy's holding the lion underneath the arm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so the book is called that because this motif represents the idea that, you are in control of your mind, right? And that these are objects of the mind, and you keep them at bay, or you kill the beast, right? You're slaying the lion or slaying the beast. And it's just the beast within. It's this psychological type experience. And so I think that's, but if you ask any archaeologist what this motif means, despite the fact that it's a worldwide phenomenon, it's found everywhere. They insist that it probably just means nothing, believe it or not.
Oh man, archaeologists diminishing something important in ancient culture. I can't believe it. Along with all the gods and all the pantheons.
Right, right. And I like to tell people that this motif is with us still today, right? This is why when you walk into a library, you walk past two lions, because you're now the physical embodiment and manifestation of this idea of the master of animals, right? As you're walking into this place of knowledge.
The Lion
Um,
Gate at Mycenae. If anybody
yeah,
pull that up, that's a big one.
yeah, and that's actually why I titled it Master of Animals, because I was helping an initiate last season, and he was saying that there was this picture that he would see all the time. He was a teacher, and so he would see this picture all the time, and it was the Lion's Gate at the Citadel of Mycenae. And so I was like, that's kind of odd. And he said, yeah, it always has this way of like striking me whenever I see it. It's just very, you know, it grabs him. You know what I mean? And so I decided to look into that, and I was like, "Oh, this is Master of Animals motif." And then I decided, well, how does that fit into all of this? And then it started to make sense. It started to all come together, how it was just like this psychological idea of taking the middle path, where you are none of these beasts on either side of you, right? You're not you're not any of these pairs of opposites. In terms of archetypal structures in the psyche, right? You're neither the sadist or the masochist. You're walking this thin line where you're none of those things, and you're holding them at bay, and that's kind of the idea.
Interesting. Do you have an idea of when you think that might be done, or are you still just in the middle of it?
I don't. I'm working on it very slowly because I've got like a million other things I'm doing, just for me, and living life. But
That's good. You need that too.
that's right. Um, I don't know. Hopefully within the next year sometime, um, I hope to have it finished. And finished doesn't mean that it's released, because that's, you've got editing
We're gonna
after
hold you.
that.
No, we're
It's
holding you to that, Matt. It's got to be done.
We want to check out the
Hey, let me
first
ask you.
draft.
Let me ask you this: if for new experiencers, is there any kind of suggestion you may have for what they need to read, where they need to go, how do they, any kind of a process that you think would benefit them?
Well, so experiencers reach this point in their life where they're starting to have these experiences because they do this positive personality disintegration. They think things through really carefully. And so I would say just apply what you've always done in life to difficult situations, and apply that to the phenomenon. Just because it's so much farther outside the realm of anything you've dealt with doesn't mean that you have to deal with it any differently, right? You just keep doing what you've always done, and face it head on, without reservation or judgment, and just like I did, and you won't be sorry. It'll be painful for sure. It'll be painful and terrifying, but you'll be better off for it. And then that would be my advice to new experiencers.
That's yeah, no, that's great advice. I mean, I think that one thing I wanted to bring up, what we were mentioning earlier too. Do you think so? We talked about how you're more into the consciousness, um, physical aspects of it. Um, what do you think's happening? Like, we consciousness versus physical, but what do you think's happening on the physical level? Like, do you think it's how? Sorry, I'm getting a little bit. Somebody's getting a little bit of feedback. I can hear myself talk, but what do you think's happening where this thing's going from non-physical to physical, possibly? Do you think it's a manifestation of the mind or some sort of interaction with the mind, or do you think it's um, like how we think of a thought? Like we come up with an idea and then we manifest it into reality. Do you think that's maybe what the universe is doing with these UFOs or the phenomenon, or like what do you think's happening?
Yeah, I think that there's quite a bit of an aspect to the phenomenon that is that. Like you know, this is going to be kind of maybe difficult to understand, but with the double slit experiment, what the double slit experiment tells you is that when you so you shoot these particles out, right, and they can either behave like light or they can behave like a solid particle, right? And so what they've noticed with this experiment is that when you observe it, when you watch it, it always behaves like a solid particle. But when you're not watching it, it behaves like light, right? And so what that should be telling us about this in terms of the physicality of the universe and the non-physicality of the universe is that the universe is both, right? It's both physical and non-physical. And depending on your level of consciousness as a conscious entity within this universe, this conscious universe, um, that experience can change. And so you have all these experiencers who talk about beings coming through walls, beings just kind of either evaporating or coming together out of smoke. Um, and so I think that there's an aspect of this that, in terms of the double slit experiment and your level of consciousness, when you observe something, if you're a conscious being, you can decide to be either physical or you can behave like light. Hence, you can walk through walls, you can appear out of smoke or disappear into smoke. Um, and I think that that's kind of a hard concept to grasp, because then what you're telling people is your perception is your reality, right? And so if you perceive that this desk is going to be solid, right, or this laptop is solid and I can't put my hand through it, then that's what it's going to be. That's what it's always going to be for you.
Is that what you were
until
doing when you were bashing your phone and your computer?
Yeah, well, that was before I knew about higher consciousness. I didn't know where it was going. But yeah, I think that that's an aspect to this. And so when you become more in tune with that, then the universe says, okay, well, you're ready for more, and so you have more responsibility, and so you can either observe this thing as light, or you can observe it as a physical object. And so that becomes an aspect of, oh, with this pen, do I want this to be solid and pick it up in my hand, or do I want my hand to go right through it? I think that could be an aspect of the universe in our future.
Can we just kill the elephant in the room here? Shane, everybody wants to know what the metal drum or trash can on your screen is.
This is where I keep all the blood.
You guys
Is
happy?
that
I
is,
asked you.
is that a microphone?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a fancy microphone.
Lay off my microphone.
Yeah, it's just it prevents any sort of like echo and stuff like that. Usually you'll see that in recording booths, but Shane's got to take it to that next level,
He could have used it at UFO Congress.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I could have just not used edibles. That would have been worked out a lot better.
I don't know. Flender Shane was pretty funny.
If you want to see Shane out of his mind, just go watch episode number 2.
Yeah, I did that episode after I did your episode with you, Matt. I was like, oh,
Oh,
a really
really?
good podcast. And then I did our podcast.
Yeah, right. On your show, with the show you guys did, he was normal. By the time we got him, forget it.
Oh, is
Oh,
that
wow.
that what's it called? The one with Deb?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, the one
Yeah.
where Shane said he was the most comfortable he's ever been, even more than this podcast or Mind Escape, his own podcast. Okay. I remember that, Shane.
Because my co-hosts are weird AF, man.
So what were you thinking, Shane? You thought, oh, well, I was the most relaxed I've ever. Let me relax some more and take some gummies, and then it just blew up, huh?
Well, what I was thinking is, all right, I'm not nervous anymore. I got this shit. I had a really good podcast. And then the equipment started failing. And the more the equipment failed, the more edibles I
And then he
took.
came back and he was
just a
squished.
cycle.
Somehow his picture got condensed into like a little sliver.
Slender
That was the
Shane.
worst
That's what I'm
part.
going to call it. Slender Shane.
I was so high when I came back and that picture was there. I'm like, oh shit, I'm super high. Because the screen was just waving like this. It's the middle of it.
I gotta
yelled,
say-
"Hey, Jared, I ate all your edibles."
I gotta say, I wasn't aware of UFO Congress until a few months ago when Dan Freeman brought it up to me. But it looked like you had a great time. It looked like it was a great event. Everybody looked like they were having fun. It wasn't just dry, stuffy UFO talk. People are partying. People are connecting. Looked like an awesome event.
Yeah, Shane was doing it on the
Fantastic.
company dime. Good job, Shane.
That's how I roll. Hey, I'm going to say this. Alejandro, Karen, UFO Congress, I'm appreciative. That was awesome. Roswell Daily Record for helping out and getting me down there.
Well, we should be having them on Sunday, so you can tell them then.
Oh, yeah, we are. That's cool.
Would you have you been to a UFO conference, Matt, or would you ever go to one?
Yeah, I actually did the UFO Congress last year, but it was virtual, so there was none of this fun
This
time that you
fun
guys
party
had.
time.
Is this
Yeah.
where we roll into a pitch for UFO Expo?
Yeah, go ahead.
Come and join us at UFO Expo, Matt.
Yeah, there you
Where
go.
so where is Expo gonna be?
Roswell, New Mexico.
When do you know when here?
It's March 10th to the 12th of next year.
Okay.
If you need lodging, Shane's gonna sleep in my basement. You might be able to stay down there with him. I don't know.
I already told Toby I need something 4-star or higher, so you can find me wherever I'm at. That'll be the. Not that I don't want to stay with Toby. I do. I'm sure it's an amazing time, but I'm gonna need some quiet, especially if I'm around Shane all day. So
You want that breakfast buffet.
You'll need quiet.
Are gummies legal in New Mexico?
Yes, sir.
I think they are
okay.
actually.
Yeah,
Don't
Shane
worry
should
if
have a
not.
good time there.
Shane's
We'll
got a
Join
plan on
us at UFO
transporting him.
Expo, where I may or may not be high as hell.
Not on stage, I hope.
No, not on stage. Not at all.
I'll
Wouldn't do
text
something
you
like
after
that.
Matt too, because there might be another reason that we can't announce yet that you might want to be there, based on something that I've been doing with you too, that I'm sure you can think about. So.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So yeah, we'll talk about that in the future. But yeah, it might be fun if we can get everybody, full crew there.
Yeah, I mean, that's far enough in the future that I can definitely plan for it. So I'll go ahead and say that I'll be there.
We're gonna hold you to it. That'd be awesome.
And Shane
Yeah.
will hold you to it.
I will have some codes to give the hotels to get a discount for the event. Hopefully in the next few days I can put that online, but I'm not sure how many stars they are, Mike. But we don't have a Ritz here.
I'm gonna call Peninsula, and I'm gonna call the Ritz, and I'm gonna say, why don't you have one in Roswell? Because we're gonna have to build one for when I come into town.
Oh, they're gonna build you a Four Seasons. Don't worry about it.
Let's do it. I'm in.
Shane's on the construction.
You don't want that. Trust me. I can't put cameras together. You don't want me putting anything you're sleeping in together.
I would totally do like a high-end camper too. I think that would be fun.
You can ride with Chase.
We pull up in like one of those like musician style buses with Shane's face on the side, like it's some sort of rock group. I'm in.
What would the name of the group be?
Lil
Initiated.
Shane? I don't know. Yeah, Initiated. There you go.
Yeah.
But yeah, before we wrap it up here, do you guys have any other questions for Matt?
No, I'm thankful that I met him. He's part of my journey, figuring out what this was, getting better, not losing my mind. So I'm appreciative that people like him came first and wrote a book or speak on the subject. That's the only reason I'm doing this now, actually, so I can continue that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I wrote the book too, because I realized that I'm not the only one going through this, and so why not share? You know what I mean? It's garbage that we've kept this secret for so long, and we need to stop it. So, yeah.
My only question is, are you coming on again?
Me? Am I coming on this show again?
Yes, sir.
Oh yeah, I'll come on. Whenever you guys like.
Yeah, we'll get you back on in the future. Obviously, this is the third one. Once we get a little bit more of a flow going, I think. I mean, this was a good episode, but I think once we dial it in even more, I think it'll be a little crisper. So
Yeah.
Definitely. Chase.
Yeah, and I apologize that I have the all of the excitement and personality of brown wallpaper, but
no, dude, you're good.
Yeah.
I'm monotone, bro. I doesn't get worse than that. So
I'm the opposite end of the spectrum. I'm too much.
Yeah. No, dude, I'm impressed by Shane. Like he's usually the most fidgety dude, but I gotta say, Shane, I'm very impressed. This guy took notes and he really dialed it in.
Well, I
He
feel
was
comfortable
drawing
with Matt.
stick figures the whole time.
Yeah.
You know he was.
As long as I pretend you two aren't here and it's just Matthew, I'm good.
I will say today's the first day I woke up with I didn't have 30 messages from you, Shane. So
Yeah.
maybe you're calming down finally.
It was because the night of edibles before this last week.
This guy's just walking around. He's got an IV of edibles.
Oh my gosh. Let me tell you this. Somebody actually took edibles, went and talked to John Ramirez. I'm like, what are you thinking? And they come back upstairs because I think John Ramirez thinks I'm an agent. I kept looking at my phone, looking at him, looking at my phone, looking at him. I was like, you're crazy.
John's a great guy. I think he wouldn't have thought anything of it, I'm sure.
Oh, everyone there was. So
Mhm.
it was a good time.
Yeah.
Hey, I mean, look, you never know. In the spaces, I always think that there's like one dude like Hank Azaria sitting in a bunker somewhere doing all the different voices for each person. Like, hey, I'm this person, I'm that person. But no, but they are all real people because I saw them all in Shane's photos. So,
Someone
what?
just threw a shout out to the Shane Tar in the chat.
Yeah.
Mr.
Also,
Sexy Horse.
Chase did have a question for Matthew earlier. I didn't ask it, but do you think the phenomenon is, he said like a mirror. I'll rephrase it as more of like psychomimetic, like it's a reflection of our own psyche, if you will. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think absolutely. That's one of the things I talk about in my book is there's this woman named Mabel Collins who describes the experience. She was an author too with William Walker Atkinson, but she describes the experiences like gazing into a giant mirror, and it's all just your psyche, right? And I mean, there's stories about this, right? Like this is why Alice in Wonderland, it's through the looking glass. You're going through the looking glass to the other side, and things get crazy in between. Uh, and then and so this is something that people have always known about about the phenomenon, but people don't necessarily talk about so much.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff there. And actually, a lot of people don't know psychedelics used to be called psychomimetics because they were reflecting your own psyche or psychosis. So, yeah, interesting stuff. Good question, Chase. I'm actually kind of surprised you asked that, but I appreciate it. Thanks. Um, yeah, I think that's it. I want to thank you. I appreciate you coming on, taking the time, Matt. You're in the spaces a lot. You're trying to help people and share your own experiences. Shane's big on obviously doing that as well, and I think that if we get enough people doing that, and people feel like they can be heard and share something that they feel like is so private, or obviously there's a whole laugh factor thing and people not taking you seriously or think you're lying or whatever. So yeah, I just want to thank you for sharing your story. And yeah, I'm gonna give it away to Shane here. He's gonna give it all the plugs here.
All right, let's see if we can go with this. What's up, guys? I'm Shane, Old Vet Symposium from UFO Twitter. I'm an experiencer, and one of the things that I'm very grateful for people like Matt writing books, these podcasts, other experiencers, any way you can get this message out. So I just want to point out that I got myself a copy of Estimate of Situations comic, and it's sick. Now, this is important to me because I'm a comic book nerd, but any way that you can help out by putting this message out is awesome. So I want to shout out Roswell Daily Record for helping get us here. Buy some merch. Wounded Warrior for saving my life. Buy some merch. My brothers and sisters will thank you. I also want to shout out the UFO Twitter community. Brothers and sisters and family that are in here. Buddy, Chase, Kyle, Ahmed. I saw Screen Name in here as well, and Logan earlier. And Emily, Kai, thank you guys for your support. Randy, love all of you, and I'm very appreciative.
The link to Wounded Warriors down below. If anybody wants to support and give a little something to Wounded Warrior, please do so. Also, again, please buy Matthew's book, Initiated. Link is down below. Please support our podcast. We have many different ways to do that. One of which would be just following us on all the different social media platforms on our Linktree link down below. You can also leave us a nice 5-star review on Apple Podcast and Spotify if you appreciate this show. And yeah, I mean, just, like I said, follow us on YouTube, follow us on Twitter. I have all the links down below. And we're going to keep doing our thing. And one more thing, too. If you like these kinds of conversations, obviously, I do Mind Escape, which we've been going now for about 5 years now. Shane's a producer on the show. Toby's a friend of the show. And if you like what you see on here, I've had Matthew on there a couple times, as well as many different people across many different topics. So, but we love everybody. We appreciate everybody participating and supporting, and everybody's been so cool. yeah, just good vibes, and that's what we're all about. We want to create this community vibe of experiencers and people that can share and support each other. I want to help. We want to help people achieve their artistic and creative goals while we do it ourselves. So I hope that comes through.
As the executive producer of Mind Escape podcast, I agree.
Whoa, bro. You might be able to get that title, but we're gonna have to talk off air because there's gonna have to be some sort of transfer happening, and I don't know what that is yet. But no, seriously though, Toby's awesome. None of this would be possible without Toby. I didn't even know who Toby was until Shane introduced me to him about a month ago.
Dude, the synchronicities brought me here, and I'm not even gonna lie about that.
All the synchronicities, like, I don't become close with people, especially on the internet. So the fact that we all hit it off so quickly, it had so many different things in common, and it is a synchronicity. And I think that this all happened for a reason, and we're here to connect people and help people. And if we have resources that can help anybody in any different way, creatively, like I said, or whatever, let us know. We're here to help. So that's my spiel. Again, I want to thank you, Matthew, for coming on. We'll have you back on in the future. Check out Matthew's book one more time, The Initiated. I highly recommend it, and he's working on a second one, Master of Animals. Super psyched for that. And I'll end this the way that we end Mind Escape, because I think it's just a good way to end the show, which is we love everybody. Stay safe out there. We'll catch you next time. Peace.